welcome to meeting number 39 of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
Format pursuant to the House Order of June 23rd, 2022, and therefore members can attend in person in the room and remotely by using the Zoom application. So today we have, we're running two panels. Today we're having to start late due to votes. I will probably run this one a little longer than the second one just because we have more witnesses at the first one. We'll try and I'll probably be pretty merciless on the clock, but we'll get through two full rounds and opening statements on the first hour, and then we will go to the try and transition as quickly as possible to the second panel. So I would like to welcome our witnesses now for the first hour. From the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Françoise Bernier, Stéphane Derry, Lorenzo Arachi, Teresa Maioni, Lynn Wah. We also have from Border Services Agency, Scott Miller, Jonathan Moore, and Dan Pro. I hope that I have identified all of our witnesses today. And with that, I would like to get started, and we will start with Mr. Derry. The floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you for inviting Public Service and Procurement Canada to appear before you today to discuss the topic of Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle border crossing. I'm joined today by François Bernier, Director General for the Quebec region, Lorenzo Iarachi, Assistant Deputy Minister of our Portfolio Planning and Communication Branch, and at the request of the committee, also present today are Lynn Roy, Senior Director of our Access to Information and Privacy team, and Teresa Maioni of our Access to Information and Privacy team. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional land unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Mr. Chair, Public Service and Procurement Canada, or PSPC, procure goods and services on behalf of department and agency throughout government. The department buys some $22 billion worth of goods and services and construction each year from nearly 10,000 suppliers. In addition to this, and other roles, the department managed one of the largest and most diverse portfolio of real estate in the country, and we are the Government of Canada real estate expert. Mr. Chair, the Canada Border Service Agency, or CBSA, is responsible for providing integrated services that support national security and public safety priority and facilitate the flow of person and goods at federal border crossing. As this committee is aware, since the summer of 2017, a very high volume of asylum seekers have arrived at Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle crossing. This has resulted in the need for the CBSA, along with its partner, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, and Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, to increase their infrastructure to process claims and provide services to those seeking asylum. On top of this, the COVID-19 pandemic added increased pressure on infrastructure and service delivery. On behalf of the CBSA and IRCC, to date, PSPC has awarded some 30 contracts for goods and services to manage an increase in asylum seeker at the crossing. I can tell you that all contracts related to the crossing have been publicly disclosed. The majority of these contracts were competitively awarded for an approximate total value of $108,560,000. The department has also negotiated several land and service leases in the immediate vicinity of Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle port of entry, as required by CBSA and IRCC. These lease agreements are used for a range of activity from a triage center, dorms, office space, parking, and for the hotel adjacent to the border crossing. The approximate total value of these land and service leases is approximately $28 million. The The location and requirement for leases were determined by our client, CBSA and IRCC, to meet their operational requirement, namely of having facility close to the border to deal with the influx of asylum seekers. All lease for the program in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle have been disclosed. However, in accordance with market practices, the specific value of the lease have not been disclosed given the commercially sensitive nature of this information. Nonetheless, we have noted the value of the leases at $28 million, and we have provided this committee through the clerk with the document that breaks down the value of the lease by client. This information also breaks down the value of the lease as well as the lease improvement that were made to the property at the request of our client. Mr. Chair, in supporting our colleagues at CBSA and IRCC, we worked to meet their operational requirement at the time when the number of asylum seekers was increasing. In this regard, we worked closely with the CBSA, IRCC, and other federal partners to find space in the immediate vicinity of the border crossing and to complete the necessary lease improvement to ensure that the need of our client department, in this case CBSA and IRCC, were met so that they could properly serve and protect Canadians. Throughout our activity, we strive to meet our clients' operational requirement while ensuring value for money for Canadian taxpayers. We also strive to undertake our activity in a fair and transparent manner, while ensuring we meet obligation in the Access to Information and Privacy Act. Public Service and Procurement Canada will continue to work with federal partners to support their need in the relation to Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle border crossing. My colleague and I will be pleased to answer your question regarding our support to federal partners.
Thank you. And now we'll have an opening statement from the Canada Border Services Agency. I'm not certain which official is going to deliver that statement, but whomever wishes to do so may start now for up to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm very pleased to speak to you today and provide some information on the roles and responsibilities of the Canada Border Services Agency with regard to refugee asylum seekers, and to discuss more specifically the agency operations at the Roxham Road crossing. My name is Jonathan Moore. I am the Vice President of the Finance and Corporate Management Branch and the CBSA's Chief Financial Officer. I am joined today by my colleagues, Scott Miller, Vice President of the Strategic Policy Branch, and Dan Prue, Executive Director of Information Sharing, Access to Information, and the Chief Privacy Office. As you are aware, the number of refugee asylum claimants has grown significantly in recent years. The CBSA has needed to mobilize resources from across Canada to help address these increases. In particular, since 2017, with the arrival of large numbers of claimants at Roxham Road. Border security and integrity is a shared mandate between the CBSA and the RCMP. The CBSA is responsible for enforcing legislation at designated ports of entry. The RCMP is responsible for enforcing the law between those ports of entry. It is important to note that the CBSA encourages all refugee asylum claimants to apply to enter to Canada at a designated port of entry. However, the number of between the port arrivals, sometimes referred to as irregular arrivals, has continued to increase. Since the 1st of January of this year, 2022, the CBSA has already processed over 26,500 irregular arrivals in Quebec, mostly at the Roxham Road crossing. Those who enter in between designated ports of entry, in this case at Roxham Road, are intercepted by the RCMP and brought to the nearest CBSA port of entry, which is at Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. Then they are processed by CBSA officers and they make a claim for asylum. The role of the CBSA is to determine the admissibility of a person and the eligibility of the claim under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. All refugee claimants, whether they arrive at a designated port of entry or between the ports of entry, undergo a health and security screening. The security screening is a crucial part of the overall assessment of whether a person is admissible to Canada. The process ensures that anyone who wants to come to Canada has not committed serious crimes and does not pose a health or safety risk to Canadians. We have the appropriate resources in place to ensure that no one leaves the port of entry until the security screening has been completed. Our border services officers work closely with other law enforcement agencies, both nationally and internationally, to help identify and investigate persons who may be inadmissible to Canada. In some cases, officers may arrest, detain, and remove persons who are inadmissible. Since 2017, there have been over 18,800 irregular arrivals in Quebec, and so the numbers were too high to process at the agency's existing port of entry facilities. Therefore, to ensure proper screening and to accommodate the large number of refugee claimants at Roxham Road, it was necessary for the CBSA to invest in additional processing and accommodation infrastructure in partnership with our colleagues at PSPC. Since 2017, this infrastructure has been provided for a number of temporary structures, mainly using mobile trailers for both accommodation and processing facilities. The leases on these mobile facilities are due to expire at the end of the year, and so a decision was taken to consolidate the operations into 2 existing buildings to house all of the functions of a regional processing centre. In October 2021, the agency announced a contract to retrofit these buildings situated at the Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle port of entry. The work is due to be completed shortly and will help to ensure adequate waiting space and humanitarian assistance, while refugee asylum claimants are being processed at the border. Once the CBSA has completed its processing, the claimants' longer-term accommodation requirements fall under the responsibility of the IRCC and the provinces. The CBSA is committed to treating all people who are seeking asylum in Canada with compassion and ensuring they are afforded a due and fair process under the law. We will also continue to ensure the security and the safety of all Canadians by following public health guidelines at the border. I hope this information has been helpful to you, and I will now make myself and my colleagues available to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and we'll begin with the 6-minute rounds and go first to Monsieur Paulus. You have up to 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. I'll be brief. I have here a map, and sometimes it can be confusing. So we have the point of entry here for Roxham Road, and the migrants seeking asylum arrive there, and then they are driven to the camp where there's the infrastructure and a hotel that is there. I've been there 3 times, so I know how it works on the Canadian side and the American side. But the issue that we have now, we can see with Mr. Gay, his zone is close to all of the other facilities, and it is easy to receive immigrants there. But how do we negotiate a contract when there is someone who has fields and says, I can charge what I want, and then we have a hard time knowing what the negotiation rules are, how we can establish a price that is fair and equitable when told that there's nowhere else to do it? And we could have similar installations. There's equipment that could have been set up elsewhere for a lower price. So how could we explain the price? This is my first question. And also, how do we justify that there is sensitive information? What is sensitive information on areas like this?
Merci, très bonne question.
Thank you. Very good question. I would like to start by saying that we need to rent buildings or others according to the current value. So we have teams that look at the value in certain areas. We analyze this value and then we negotiate, especially when there is only one owner and there's not a lot of space. This can be applied to different buildings. Many of our leases vary. And often we can't have any competition because there aren't enough owners, so we negotiate on a case-by-case basis while doing a market analysis report. We work with third-party companies to see the value, and then we negotiate with the person. Thank you. You know how our time is precious, so I understand that. But can you confirm? I've heard that the hotel at Saint-Bernard since 2017 has been rented by the Government of Canada, and now we're seeing that from 2017 to 2020, the Government of Canada paid $15 million, so $5 million a year to rent rooms, and that has continued from 2015 on. And has the hotel been used? Because when I visited, the hotel had never been used. They used, instead, mobile homes. So has that hotel been used? And is the price paid the information that I shared? I will give the floor to François, who is the DG for the region of Quebec. To respond to your question, how do we ensure that the price is reasonable? We do have an expert. We have an expert team that revised the file. We shared the unique need to be close to the CBSA facilities. Most of these lots were needed, and so our experts negotiated. And $5 million per year, is that what it cost the government to rent the hotel? And has the hotel been used since the beginning? Answer: I don't have the answer with regards to the price per year, but last time I was there a few weeks ago, the hotel was being used. For the information of the committee, we would like to have a report on the use of this hotel, because for the first few years it was not in use. Now for the lots where we have these trailers in the cafeteria, how much is the government paying for this? Answer: the leases totaled $28 million, as my colleague stated. There's about $13 million for Mr. Gay on behalf of the CBSA for that lot and for neighboring lots. And you believe that these amounts are justifiable for renting lots. We didn't purchase these lots. We have been renting these lots, and we're talking about millions of dollars for lots that aren't being used for much. If you will allow me to respond, these are for leasing as well as leasehold improvements. So the necessary improvements to meet the needs of our clients.
Fergus for up to 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. And I would like to thank those who are participating via video conference. Firstly, I would like to thank you for the work that you do as public servants. I know it can be difficult to work in circumstances where the situation is evolving quickly, and I think that you met your responsibilities well, and I think Canadians need to know it. Mr. Derry, you mentioned the market value of these lots that we rented from Mr. Gay. Can you give us an idea, without giving information on commercial agreements, as have your consultants stated that what we negotiated is well within the scope of the market value? Thank you for the question. We examine the needs of our clients. We are an optional service, and for the federal government, we receive the needs of the client. We analyze this need. We analyze what is available in order to meet these needs for the clients. In this case, it needed to be close to l'école. We hired our experts internally, and our internal experts work with external experts to examine all of the possibilities. After that, once we find what meets the needs of our client, in this case, it was the lots owned by Mr. Gay, and then we enter into a negotiation. And we believe that considering the time and considering the infrastructure and the improvements that were made, we needed electricity. As stated in our opening remarks, we built dorms. Mr. Gay and his company sent us in prices for these processes, and we believe that the price is reasonable. The value for Canadians was reasonable for Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. Thank you. I apologize for pushing this along. I only have 3 minutes left. Canada has a professional public service that is independent, and I would like to know, and if you want to add any nuances you can, did the Deputy Minister's office play a role in this contract or in negotiations to determine the market value? Answer. Thank you for the question. There was no interference from any offices with PSPC's team for this designation. Our experts worked according to the needs of the CBSA, RCMP, and IRCC, and we respected the best value for Canadians. Question. I have another question. I imagine there are thresholds of value for a contract to receive approval with regards to leases and service contracts. That $28 million, did it reach that threshold? Answer. No, they did not reach the threshold, and my colleague can share those thresholds for leases. For leases and improvements, we're talking about $26 million, so it is not necessary to have the minister's approval or her office's approval. The total value is $28 million for this infrastructure. So if I understand you correctly, this is $8 million from the threshold. We're talking about 9 leases and improvements to these lots over 5 years. Question. So this delegation of power has been in place for a while? Answer, for a few years. Before this contract was approved. Thank you for your time. Mr. Chair, I give the floor back to you.
Next to Monsieur Villemeux pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I would have liked to have more than an hour to ask questions. Ms. Roy, I have a question for you. How much time do you have to respond to an access to information request? Thank you for the question. Usually we have 30 days, but we often have exceptions, and we can always ask for an extension according to the request. Each request is treated individually according to the documents received. In an article from January 14th, 2022, we heard that it takes over 200 days to respond to a request. Is this justifiable, 240 days? Answer: it depends on the number of documents received. It depends on the number of ATIP requests that the organization receives. Each request is processed depending on the level of priority. We need to give the time to third parties and other departments to give us information. So from that moment on, yes, it is something that can take up to 240 days. So you're not shocked by 240 days. Answer: no. Question: so 27th of September 2022, Radio-Canada, they mentioned an exception, as you mentioned, and we talked about a national emergency. Can you define this for me, please? National security, depending on the situation. In this case, we're talking about the situation at l'école. So again, these are circumstances that need to be analyzed, and we need to determine if that type of exemption is applicable. In this case, it was applied. Why? Answer: for the question, including leases, there was an exception to the rule of 30 days for national emergencies or for national security. After your analysis, what justified that exemption? Answer: Teresa, I don't know if you might be able to respond.
National security exception was taken on this particular file. That would not be that's something in the context of a law. This does not meet that criteria. So we didn't consider that particular exception in this case.
C'est tout de même ce qui a été invoqué aujourd'hui.
That is what was shared with the journalists, however. We could talk about, so not when the contract was given, then we may have made the request for that exemption. And again, here we're talking about contracts or leases that are two types of different things. Should these contracts be made public? Answer: I just want to state that access to information requests are examined individually. They each have their own circumstances. In the case of requests, question: I apologize for cutting you off, but the Access to Information Commissioner said that you have a way of doing things that is very secret. Now for Mr. Proulx. When did the government decide that the arrival of asylum seekers in Canada is an emergency?
Dirige ta question à moi.
Is that question for me?
Question précise.
Maybe Scott might be able to respond.
Sorry, yes, thank you. No, there's, when we process access to information requests along the lines as laid out by my colleague, we look at all the different exceptions under the Access to Information Act. And in this case, with access to information requests related to Roxham Road, we consult with PSPC on amounts paid and look at the questions around economic interests of Canada.
Mais vous savez, je ne parle pas d'argent.
I'm not talking about money here. I'm talking about access to information. We said that it's an emergency situation. Mr. Proulx, what do you think of this? That it is an extreme emergency to house people in trailers, fenced-in trailers. Where is the extreme emergency that makes it so that we cannot respond to an access to information request. The emergency situation at l'école and the access to information request, well, there's no correlation between the two. It's not a matter of not responding to an access to information request. You need to understand that processing the request was done. It takes as much time as it takes. I can give you more context. After a global pandemic from 2021 to 2022, the CBSA received 51% more access to information requests. I manage every day 6,000 access to information requests. Over 100 a day. And so processing these requests is independent from the emergency situation at l'école. That's why I misunderstood your question. So we process these requests and we take the time that we need in order to consult those that we need to consult.
I have to end with that and go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
I'm just going to go ahead, Mr. Chair, and pick up on this line of questioning. I'm very interested in a September 27, 2022 Radio Canada article. Public Services and Procurement Canada stated that it entered into a non-competitive contracts given the national emergency due to the irregular arrival of a large number of asylum seekers. And according to the Treasury Board's contracting policy, notice 2007-4 on non-competitive contracting, it states that a pressing emergency may involve the following: A, an actual or imminent life-threatening situation; B, a disaster that endangers the quality of life or safety of Canadians; C, a disaster that results in the loss of life; or D, a disaster that results in a significant loss or damage to Crown property. Which of these situations does a situation at Roxham Road fit into? To you, yeah, Lorenzo, if you could answer this, would be great.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So again, in response to your question, I'll have to get back to you in terms of which specific element came back or would have been used. The only thing that I would clarify is that we are talking about leases and contracts, and those are two separate things. So the exception in terms of emergency provisions would apply under the contracting side, but with regards to which contracts were awarded based on an emergency basis and what the rationale is, I'd have to go back to the committee.
You have the rationale on, to my colleague's point, on when this was considered a national emergency?
Yeah, so so again, my colleagues from procurement branch, because I'm not there anymore, would probably be able to provide you with more information, but for every file in which there is a national security exemption that is applied, the rationale is put on file.
So you have those on file?
They would be on file.
Excellent. Well, then, through you, Mr. Chair, would you be willing to go ahead and submit those rationales to this committee for our consideration?
Yes. May I add just one more thing?
Sure.
So just in terms of the national security exemption, I just want to clarify that that's in terms of the application of the trade agreements and the obligations that are identified therein. So what a national security exemption basically does, it allows the government to be able to undertake procurements, for example, on an expedited basis.
Sure. And the pressing emergency under the non-competitive contracting, you're saying, is separate from the leasing?
That's correct.
Okay. But in your opinion, were you provided with the pressing emergency rationale on that would be congruent with that contracting policy?
If the contract was awarded on an emergency basis, yes, it would be.
So in your opinion, are the definitions of a pressing emergency sufficiently narrow to appropriately justify exemptions to Canada's competitive procurement requirements?
With regards to the contracts that were awarded in this specific case?
Generally speaking. And then you could provide specificity, sir.
Sorry, could I ask you to ask the question?
Are the definitions of a pressing emergency under the Treasury Board's contracting policy, 2007, on non-competitive contracting, right? When you invoke a pressing emergency, it would be different than a national emergency. I've given you parameters. Are the definitions clear enough so that your staff have the right guardrails in place to ensure you're meeting the threshold?
Thank you for clarifying. I apologize for not catching that the first time. So the short answer is yes. I think there is information that's available to the staff, including from Treasury Board Secretariat, in terms of the distinctions between those two types of emergencies, and we operate within those parameters.
And are you well versed on the Conflict of Interest Act as it relates to procurement?
Fairly well versed.
Fairly well. Perfect. So Section 4 of the Conflict of Interest Act provides that a public office holder is in a conflict of interest when he or she exercises an official power, duty, or function that provides an opportunity to further his or her private interests or those of his or her relatives or friends, or to improperly further another person's private interest. According to that same September 27th Radio Canada article, it was identified that potentially there was a public office holder involved in this. So for the record, was a public office holder involved in the allocation of contracts to Mr. Guy?
In the allocation of contract with a public office holder?
Correct.
Not that I'm aware of, but I will just want to clarify for the committee that while I worked in procurement branch previously, I'm not there at this point. I haven't been there for 6 months, so.
How long did you spend there?
Within procurement branch, about 4 years.
So enough time to kind of get versed on this stuff?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So in your opinion, given the reporting on donations to both Liberal and Conservative parties, do you believe that the allocation of contracts to Mr. Gree creates a conflict of interest or a public perception of conflict given his political donations?
So what I can tell you is that political donations is not something that's explored as part of the procurement process.
Do you think maybe it should be?
I will leave that for the committee to decide.
So what due diligence do you do then on contracting for officials to undertake concerning potential conflicts of interest, given that what's before us here today?
So again, I think that, to my knowledge, donating to a political party on the part of an individual or a business is not cause for not awarding a contract.
At what point would a contribution be material enough for it to be considered a conflict?
So in terms of materiality, like dollar amounts?
Sure.
I wouldn't know the answer to that question, sir.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would just state that some of the ambiguity around, obviously, this process. For me, I'll just go ahead and close by stating that I'm coming to this with an open mind. I want to get to the facts. If we don't have the facts in terms of what the potential breaches were, I'm not interested in doing this for a long time, but I'm really keenly interested in making sure that we have a clear understanding of what took place.
Thank you. You're out of time. Thank you, Mr. Green. And now to Mr. Couric for. We are on the second round now. It'll be 5 minutes for Mr. Couric. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think that certainly in the debate that led up to the adoption of this motion, there was a significant amount of time spent on the differences between what we're trying to nail down at this committee, and that has to do with the situation surrounding contracts, and others that wanted to make it about the immigration situation. And there is a big difference here. That certainly is an important subject, and to note Mr. Moore's comments about they encourage legal entry to the country, and it's unfortunate that our Prime Minister has suggested otherwise at different points in time. But we're digging down here to the integrity of contracts, and when we have $28 million that's been awarded, it is that's a significant sum of taxpayers' dollars that have gone largely without competitive contracting. So to those at Public Works, was there ever a request made by someone outside of the evaluators to suggest that that the emergency exemption should be applied?
Oui, je peux répondre. Oui, merci.
Thank you for your question. There isn't any other interference in the contracts or the leases.
So they're not being interference. That's one thing. But in terms of those involved both on the ground within the various levels of leadership involved with something that's as complex as this, the designation of it being an emergency, that's what I'm really trying to get down to. What is taken into account there?
Peut-être. Merci pour la question, monsieur.
Thank you for your question. For awarding a contract, there is no notion of emergency.
As my colleague Lorenzo pointed forward earlier, but for les mises en place des baux et améliorations.
For improvements to leases, there is no notion of emergency.
Are the context in which our clients are asking us to put these leases in place, and the main criteria were location et la rapidité de mise en œuvre.
And how quickly it could be implemented considering the operational context required by our clients.
Okay. Just curious, because there's a limited number of landowners associated with the Roxham Road crossing, who did Public Works in your office negotiate these leases with?
Merci pour la
Did you share
question.
that information with the committee?
Yes, merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question. Our lease agents negotiated with Mr. Guy for renting his lots and the infrastructure as well.
Were the negotiations directly done with Mr. Guy, or was a third party involved, or a lawyer or something like that?
Agree entre les employés du ministère.
The employees of the department, the region of Quebec, and Mr. Guy.
Okay. So when it comes to the use of the national security exemption, you just mentioned three different parties that were at the table. Which one of those requested or made the assumption that this was required a national security exemption?
Would be important that, we're talking, my colleague Lorenzo was talking about procurement contract, where we buy material, and then that national security exemption would apply. Here we're talking about leases, where there's no such clauses of national security exemption. So this is solely based on the requirement of a client, in this case CBSA, the operational need of CBSA on the ground, and the speed at which they need the infrastructure in order to respond to the crisis or the number of asylum seekers that it's increasing.
Thank you, Chair.
For up to 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimony today. Mr. Derry, I'm wondering if you can go back to 2017 and sort of lay the scene for us. What was the context? What was the urgency? Why did the government have to expand its services near the border crossing?
Thank you for the question. I think, Mike, since PSPC is a supplier of services to the government of Canada, we were not living the situation in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. My colleague of CBSA, IRCC, and RCMP were living it. So I don't know if Mr. Moore or Mr. would like to answer the situation in 2017 at Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle.
Sure, please go ahead.
So I'm happy to give some information on this. So when somebody crosses the border between the ports of entry, the RCMP intercept those individuals, and they do their own criminal records checks, and then they deliver the individuals to the port of entry to do an admissibility check. In this case, in Roxham Road in 2017, it was not possible to process that number of individuals at the existing port of entry, Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle, and so therefore additional accommodation was required on an urgent basis. The accommodation is required for a number of different functions. The first function is just to intake the individuals and have a waiting area for them. The second function is around processing those individuals initially to check identity, but then to also consider admissibility, to provide humanitarian aid, canteens, washrooms, shower facilities, and also in some cases to provide sleeping accommodation if there are too many individuals to process at the same time. So this is still the requirement today. Up until now, all of these facilities have been provided through temporary mobile accommodation, and in 2021, a leasehold improvement was agreed using PSPC as our lease arranger with Mushorgi to actually retrofit 2 of his own buildings, which would allow us to consolidate these functions. So these are the functions which were required. Clearly in 2017, it was an urgent requirement because I think on one day we had up to 400 asylum seekers coming across the border.
And what would happen to all those people if that infrastructure was not in place?
So we have to provide humanitarian assistance to those individuals as soon as the RCMP hands them over to us. And this is why we have to have the infrastructure. And it's very important to know that our infrastructure has provided the facilities for those individuals. But once they are processed, then they're handed over to the province or to the IRCC.
Okay. Mr. Derry, maybe I can go back to you and ask, we're talking about the procurement of that land. And I'm wondering if you can say if there's anybody else that you could have negotiated with to get the facilities that you needed to process the refugees coming across the border?
And my colleagues, Francois, will add to that, but in real property and in operation like this, and my colleague, Mr. Moore, mentioned that 400 people cross the border a day. When you look at a situation like that and we respond to our client needs, they wouldn't want us to rent them something because over the weekend, back in those days, the team of my colleague, they went around, what could we get? But then we're talking 15, 20 kilometers away. Now you're getting into logistic of carrying and transporting all those migrants and before they get checked. So the location was, and Mr. Gay owns all the land around the Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle, as you could see on the map that was provided to every member of the committee. And the outside of that is land that is protected, agricultural land that is protected by the province. So it was quite difficult in a situation like that and to respond to the urgent need of our client to turn around and say, oh, where could we install? And at the time, if we go back at the time, it was, oh, that's going to be a month, a couple of months of an issue. Now it's been on for 5 years. So at the time, it was a pressing requirement.
Just let me ask quickly, leasehold improvements were a big part of the spending of that $28 million, the improvements to the land, right?
Absolutely. All of the building that were owned by Mr. Gay, the warehouse had to bring electricity, had to bring additional water. All the infrastructure that was put in place, leasehold improvement, is a big portion of the cost.
And for 2.5 minutes now, Monsieur Villemur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Miller or Mr. Moore, whoever is able to respond. When we say that we receive 400 people a day at Roxham Road, is not going against the safe third country agreements when we're building infrastructure for a program that should be temporary?
I guess a couple things just to clarify. It's over 100 people a day crossing at Roxham Road, so not 300 to 400. Just wanted to give that figure. The STCA applies at points of entry, of which CBSA has the responsibility. Those crossing irregularly between points of entry are not covered under the STCA.
Néanmoins, on est en train de rendre permanent.
We're making these structures permanent, and it doesn't apply with the Safe Third Country Agreement. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
We have to actually accept those that cross irregularly. We have no legal authority to direct them back. They have a right to make a claim. And so through the process that my colleague, Mr. Moore, described in terms of the flow through, that allows us to assess their eligibility to make a claim to the Immigration and Refugee Board after we have screened them, then the appropriate screenings for security, for health, and identity. So we are required by law to receive them and to do those checks.
Ça constitue une situation.
So this is what constitutes a pressing emergency.
It is absolutely a massive preoccupation myself and my colleagues, and that is why we're putting every effort to deal with it.
Earlier, we heard that pressing emergencies were defined by catastrophes that would be threatening the safety of Canadians and extreme damages to the country. Which of these applies in this case?
Well, I would defer to my colleagues on what applies in that case. What we can speak to is what legally we're bound to do, and certainly dealing with the numbers that we're crossing, those high volumes, and to be able to assess them for possible security risks, national security risks, other elements of inadmissibility, which could include organized criminality, human rights violations.
Thank you. I'm very sorry to have. I never like to interrupt anyone, especially not a witness, but we are on the clock under quite a bit of pressure for time right now.
Mr. Kelly, before I begin, I'm going to cede my time to Mr. Villemur to continue his question.
Okay, then Mr. Villemur can continue for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller, if I'm correct, there is the point where people are received by officers and then they are transferred to another location a few kilometers away and they are taken in by the RCMP and then handed over to the CBSA, correct?
That's true. The RCMP receive them, do an assessment on criminal and security checks, and then bring them to us for further processing.
Même si vous n'êtes pas la
Even if you're not the RCMP, I'll still ask you the question. I went to Roxham Road last Friday and I was not allowed access. I wanted to see it because we've been talking a lot about it. Is it normal that a parliamentarian is not allowed to see what is happening where asylum seekers are received?
I honestly wouldn't be able to speak to that. My understanding is that parliamentarians have visited the area, but the specifics of what they saw and had access to, I would have to defer to the RCMP.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Proulx.
Thank you very much. Mr. Proulx, this whole situation with these access to information requests are quite numerous, as you said, and they are linked to the situation mentioned by Mr. Miller. What do you think about this? Would you be able to repeat the question, please? Certainly. I would like to know, is this situation problematic? For an access to information point of view? Answer, yes. No, it's not something that is very different from other requests. We receive thousands of them. But having or making an access to information request is an important process. But because of the quantity of requests that you've received, it takes time. And this time that it takes you to respond, you find it normal? Answer, yes. I manage, for example, today, Monday, 6,000 access to information requests that are active that I need to manage. Tomorrow I will be receiving another 100. It is normal after the pandemic to be in the situation that we're in. There's no issue with these requests.
Two questioners of this panel will be Monsieur Paulus and Mr. Fergus. I'm going to cut it to 3 minutes each, and then we'd like to transition to the next panel as quickly as possible after that. So, thank you. Go ahead.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, from what I've seen today, is that Mr. Gay's lots are the closest to l'école, and it's the simplest way for everyone to manage the situation. And Mr. Gay could even say that he won the lottery because he requests the amount that he wants and the government pays it. Because when people arrive at Roxham, a little further on, there is a smaller border crossing. Here there's campgrounds. Have we considered negotiating with our groups? You talked about agricultural land, but we could have perhaps installed facilities there that would have cost less, but we paid Mr. Guy all the money that he wanted and no questions asked. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. And the hotel that I mentioned earlier, we're talking about a hotel that was not used. We know that there are places to sleep in trailers, about 500 people. That was from 2014, so about 100 per day. 24 to 48 hours later, they're sent elsewhere, Montreal, Toronto, in the equipment that is there, and you say that there will be dorms built. So we're receiving 500 people there, so enough space. And in summer, there were tents to receive 3,000 people. So the hotel is not being used. You said earlier that it is kind of being used. I don't know who's using it, but why is the government continuing to pay for this hotel? Answer, I would like to specify two things. As I said earlier, we are giving a service to federal departments. The hotel that was rented with different services. At the request of my colleagues from the CBSA, and they are managing, with all due respect, Mr. Derry, I've been an MP for 7 years, and we've been hearing the same thing for 7 years. CBSA is asking for this, RCMP is asking for this, and then you just deliver. Everybody, but it costs so much, and we can never get a clear answer. Do you challenge this need when a request is sent to you, or you just say, yeah, we'll pay, and we don't ask any questions? Mr. Guy won the lottery from owning property close to l'école, but nobody can answer the question. Answer. I just want to make a correction to what was said. The hotel was at the request of IRCC. But we're renting the hotel so that they can use it. But they manage the number of people who stay there, not us. We rent the hotel, and we want to do things reasonably. And we want to ensure that inaudible.
We're now on to Mr. Fergus for the final 3 minutes, and then we'll change panels as quickly as we can. Go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to come back to a question to summarize again, because I think it's very important. So, other than contractors and public servants of your department, there weren't any public office holders that are linked to departments or MPs or assistants, for example, for these contracts? And because it doesn't meet the threshold, correct? I can confirm that the thresholds are within the authority of the public servants, and they made a decision according to the requests of the IRCC and CBSA. And we responded to those requests.
To make, there are no, aside from only public servants or the people, consultants that they may contract with, were involved in the attribution of these contracts because they fell well below the delegation of authority that's been established, and has been a long time established, even before this government has come along.
Mr. President, I can confirm that this is below the authority. It is at authority that could be done by civil servant and not by political staff or the minister in this case.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Il y a une autre question.
There's another question. As you mentioned more than once, you respond to the needs of your clients, and your clients are other departments like CBSA or IRCC. And they shared the reason why, or they shared their needs. You do not assess the need, your clients do that, correct? But what you do is ensure that Canadian taxpayers will be receiving proper market value. Answer, yes, the clients define their needs. And we make sure that our solutions respect their needs.
Value for Canadian, value for money for Canadian, and what we're putting into place.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous.
Thank you everyone, and thank you to those participating online.
Thank you, and Mr. Ferguson, and as well, my thanks to all of our witnesses. And what I think I will do is just suspend for a quick moment, and I will ask our witnesses to leave the room, and we will resume with our next panel. So, with that, meeting suspended. So welcome back, everyone. I now we're resuming our study of the use of public funds in relation to the Roxham Road crossing. I would like to welcome our witness for the second hour, Monsieur Pierre Gay, Président de l'Importation Gay d'ETHI. Now, before we begin, I'm going to inform the committee that Mr. Gay asked that he be assisted by counsel, and so as specified by the rules of the House of Commons, is there consent that he be that he have counsel present?
Yes.
Nobody objects. Okay, then that's fine. He will be assisted by counsel, and with that, the witness had asked for a little bit. Beyond the 5 minutes, we're really short on time. So, Monsieur Gay, could you? Yes.
Just procedurally, the practice is that the invited witness responds to questions from members of the committee through the chair, and that their counsel, though able to advise their client. And able to be part of the appearance, as just agreed to by committee, does not entitle them standing to speak at the committee. Is that correct, Mr. Chair? Thank
you. That is correct. Yes, thank you, Mr. Barrett. So, with that, I will ask Mr. Gay to begin. And while I think we had told him he could maybe have up to 7 minutes, I'm going to ask him to keep it as short as he possibly can. So go ahead, Mr. Gay. We're a full 25 minutes or 20 minutes behind schedule, it would seem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time you're allowing me to speak today. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me today to this meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. As a citizen and a member of our community, I feel it is my responsibility to appear before you today to cooperate fully with the committee and to answer, to the best of my knowledge, its questions in relation to its study on the use of public funds related to the passage of refugee claimants on Roxham Road. Like most of you, I've carefully read the many articles that have appeared in newspapers and other publications over the past months and years. And these were regarding the challenges that the Canadian government has faced and continues to face in relation to the entry of refugee claimants, asylum claimants, and the leases entered into between the Canadian government and my companies for the purpose of placing and temporarily housing these asylum claimants. Of course, I have also noted that in several of these articles, reference has been made to the fact that in recent years, I have made certain donations to the Liberal Party of Canada, as well as to the Conservative Party of Canada, in such a way as to imply that these donations were potentially made in order to receive, many years later, preferential treatment from whatever federal government is in power. I hereby wish to take the opportunity you have given me today to clarify the following. As a citizen of this country, I believe it is the duty of us all to promote and participate in our democratic system, each in our own way. As such, I have made certain donations to the Liberal Party of Canada over the past several years, as well as to the Conservative Party, depending on the year. In total, the donations to the Liberal Party of Canada totaled approximately $20,000 and were made over a period of approximately 20 years, 20 non-consecutive years. And the donations to the Conservative Party totaled approximately $11,500 and were made over a period of more than 30 non-consecutive years. None of these donations were made in exchange for or with the objective or expectation of signing many years later any contract with the federal government of the day, whatever that may be, let alone receiving any preferential treatment from the government. Furthermore, I wish to make it clear that I am not a member or activist of any political party. I have no relationship with any politician in either the federal or provincial government, regardless of party. I have never solicited any politician or other government official to enter into contracts to lease my land and buildings in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle, which I have acquired throughout my career. In 2017, I was approached by federal government officials and others to advise me of their interest in leasing some of my land and buildings located off of Highway 15 in Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle to enable them to manage and house on a very urgent basis thousands of asylum seekers. No solicitation was made on my part. I did not consider whether or not these officials and other representatives of the federal government had conducted a competitive bidding process, or whether such a process was required in the circumstances. I was asked to assist and accommodate the government in its management of asylum seekers by leasing some of my land and buildings, which I was able to do. I understand that you wish to ask me questions today regarding these leases that were signed between the federal government and my companies. In this regard, I understand that the committee has broad powers, but I would like to make it clear that my understanding is that some of the information in these contracts may be confidential. Therefore, I would respectfully request that you not place me in a position where I would be called upon to provide such information that is considered confidential, to the extent that the committee is able to obtain such information from other sources, such as the various branches of the government in question.
Said, I wish to mention once more the fact that I am before the committee today on a voluntary basis with the intention to fully collaborate with it and to answer its questions to the best of my knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And to begin, we will go to Monsieur Paulus for up to 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gay, for being with us. Firstly, I understand you're a businessman. That's fine. But we have an issue. We don't understand how it was organized with the government. Yes, your land is well situated geographically and is close to the border. But when we're talking about $10 million to renew this contract, we have to ask questions. So we might say, Mr. Gay won the lottery. He may not have asked for it, but he won it. And we need to find out whether or not there was an abuse of power here. We can't have an answer on the costs. You say that you were approached by public servants, but we would like to know who negotiated with you, and is it those same people today, or are you working with different people now? Answer. Just to clarify, when this started, CBSA representatives knocked on my door, and I never solicited anyone. They came to me because they did not have enough space to receive asylum seekers. Do you have the name of these people? They are border services agents. They were in charge at that time. There were a few of them. And they came to see what was available. And there were other teams from Montreal and from Ottawa that came to assess whether or not it would be rentable. So once those people met you, they looked at your land and they asked, how much does it cost? They must have asked you how much it would cost to rent your land and your infrastructure. Answer, no. They transferred it to another department, to PSPC. Question, so the representatives of PSPC, and there were some who were with us earlier today, so they met with you, and what did they ask you? They said, we would like to rent some of your land, and you gave them a price? Answer, no. It started gradually. They started by renting smaller land for short periods of time. And then there was a lease that was signed for the land. It was negotiated with someone from PSPC over the phone. And we offered prices according to the market. And what would such a price be? We examined this with my accountant. We examined what the land was worth. And we had made a lot of investments. And don't forget, we're in a commercial area where I am, not a farming zone. We can't build wherever we'd like. We invested heavily in our land, and we don't have municipal services. There's no water. There is no sewage. So we have to examine what we have and what it costs. Question, so you mentioned confidentiality and certain information that you can't share. What's complicated? What is so confidential? Because an hour before the meeting, the government published information, $28 million circulating around this. What are you afraid of us knowing? Because you mentioned it in your opening remarks. You said you don't want to receive questions on this. Why? Answer, I have nothing to answer. People came to knock on my door. I didn't solicit anyone. When we signed contracts, we were told that this data was confidential for immigration and security reasons. So it's the government who has asked you to maintain confidentiality. You didn't ask for any of that. Answer, no. We don't announce those numbers as landlords. And when we sign contracts, we don't share this information with our neighbors. It's because it's being paid with public funds. That's why we're digging deeper. And I think I'm running out of time. You mentioned earlier that you don't have any relationships with any members of the government. So, but you do know Ms. Shanahan, correct? Yes.
Now we go to Ms. Sachs for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Monsieur Gay, for joining us today. Monsieur Gay, how long have you owned the land at Saint-Bernard de la Colle?
Thank you for the question, Mr. President. We've owned the land for several years. My father was living on the farm. It's all part of a farm.
Excellent. And I'll just lead off from there, if I may. I understand it's been in the family and that you've lived there for a long time. Who actually lives at Roxham Road in terms of the households that are there?
It's individual family. from what I know, is that it's individual families that live at different houses along that road.
Sure. And would they be able to accommodate or deal with 100 asylum seekers a day going past their doors?
Could you reframe that question, please?
Would they be able to handle or be happy about, or does it disrupt their lives of having 100 asylum seekers or more go past their doors every day?
I presume it does. I haven't spoken to any of them. We know that they're not happy about it. They're very disappointed to see that there's traffic, I guess, and buses, and the evaluation of their property is probably not maintained as what it was before.
So it would be fair to say that at Roxham Road itself, it's disruptive to the local residents.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, and your area at Saint-Bernard de la Colle, which is actually at the border, is a distance of about 5 kilometers, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and as mentioned previously, both CBSA and IRCC and Border Security do have an obligation under the Third Party Act to assist asylum seekers when they do cross the border. We're not allowed to turn them away, and they need where to go. What's the weather like in Saint-Bernard de la Colle around now and through the winter?
Well, now the weather's the same as Montreal, except that we have probably more snow in our area in the wintertime, and it can get very cold, like in minus 10 Celsius,
So-
and the wind and everything like that.
So difficult outside conditions for someone who's seeking safety and shelter and safe harbor.
Definitely too cold for them.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that CBSA approached you, some agents came to you to help resolve an issue of asylum seekers crossing at Roxham Road and looking for a solution so that the government could meet its obligations under the Third Party Act, and that it took time to develop that relationship to understand what the needs were in setting up safe harbor at Saint-Bernard de la Colle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and when you began, you mentioned this, and as did officials, in terms of commercial market value, you did your assessments, but I can also hear you are a man of compassion, not only a businessman. So in the process of the negotiations, investments are made in leaseholder agreements in order to, when any landlord sets up a lease agreement, there are adjustments, accommodations, renovations that need to be made, and the costs were calculated in conjunction with officials to create an operational facility for CBSA and IRCC, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the official said that it was fair market value. Do you feel that it was not only fair market value, that maybe you accommodated due to the conditions at hand of folks who are coming through, of understanding that this was a real need?
Yes, well, our hotel, take the business about the hotel, our rooms are rented in the summertime at the same price as we rented it to the CBSA, actually it was Immigration Canada who rented the rooms. And in the wintertime, they get a 35% discount on the rooms, so they pay approximately $100 a day.
So a fair value rate, in other words.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And just continuing in that line of question, one of my colleagues asked earlier about a public office holder. Who did you negotiate with in terms of the leases themselves? I don't need names, I just need in terms of title or office.
Oh, it was Travaux Publics Canada.
So it wasn't a minister of the Crown? Yes or no?
No.
Was it a chief electoral officer?
No.
Was it a member of ministerial staff?
No.
Was it a member of parliament?
No.
Was it a governor and council appointee or any of the following persons, including a lieutenant governor, a member of Office of Stat of the Senate, House of Commons, or Library of Parliament?
No.
Okay, so no one who fits the definition of a public office holder, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Monsieur Gay. And on that note, how long have these lease agreements been in place, and are they on without disclosing too much, is it an annual renewal? Is it a term renewal? I come from a commercial real estate background, so I'm a little bit curious.
Well, the leases, some are for 1 year, and some have been renewed for month to month. Some
Right.
are renewed for 6 months, and some are renewed for 1 year.
So in general
lately-
in general terms, the spirit of the leases are on an as-need basis?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we go now to Monsieur Villemur.
Merci, Monsieur Gay, pour votre présence.
Thank you, Mr. Guy, for being with us. I agree with you. Making a donation to a political party is not a crime, but you've had changing allegiances. Earlier, my colleague mentioned that the hotel was empty for quite a while. Is that true? Answer: no. Thank you for the question. The hotel was being used most of the time. We received the asylum seekers and worked with IRCC and with health services, and a lot of asylum seekers stayed at the hotel. They were there for a few weeks to quarantine. They were there through COVID. Some of them had COVID. Some are vaccinated, some are not. The hotel was being used. Currently, the hotel is about 75 to 80% full. The restaurant, the bar, the reception hall, they are being used for asylum seekers. It is now a bus terminal, in fact. So there's not any, it was never at any point empty. There was perhaps a week or two, maybe, when the borders were closed, but there was always somebody there. But during COVID, apologies for interrupting you, during COVID, it was not considered empty or almost empty. Answer: no, there was always somebody there. Question: earlier you talked about confidential agreements, and when we sign a lease, we don't share all of the details publicly, of course. Were there confidential agreements made at the request of the government, so beyond what is usually done in a real estate negotiation? Answer: as a businessman, I signed contracts with PSPC, and those people mentioned that the rates were confidential. So when I was negotiating, I assumed that everything was confidential. Now, if the government would like to disclose these amounts, they can. You're not against this, then? Answer: no. Question: are you currently negotiating any other agreements other than the 9 mentioned earlier? Answer: 2 contracts were signed recently for the 2 buildings at 337 and 339. The leases started in July for 5 years and 337 for 5 years. But there's nothing in the works currently for other negotiation. Everything is currently a status quo. Question: is it the status quo because there's a lot of media attention, or is it a normal phase? Answer: it's the normal phase. If the newspapers want to talk about it, then that's fine. Question: so just to summarize, the confidential agreements were made by the government. You're not against it being made public? Answer: no, I have nothing to hide. Thank you very much. So we'll ask government what we can do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Finished? Yes. Okay. We'll go to Mr. Green then for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I want to welcome Mr. Guy here. I know that reports in the media probably weren't welcome on your behalf, just in terms of the way things were framed. You know, myself, I'm trying to get to the bottom of the facts in this particular situation. I recognize that you may have, you know, some support with you in terms of what you can and can't say pertaining to the matters around your property. So I'm going to ask a couple general questions, and then I'm going to allow you to reflect on some of the other lines of questions that have come your way that maybe with more time you would have answered more fully. So the first question is, could you describe, to the best of your ability, using your own words, what the facilities would be like on your commercial properties housing these migrants?
Well, okay, the facilities. If we come to the beginning, at the beginning, Customs and I should say CBSA and Travaux Publics, they rented 2 suites from my hotel in the beginning. And then they rented our conference room for a very short period of time, like 10 days. And in 2018, they rented the hotel, all our rooms. And our accommodations are excellent. We had to have, at the hotel, we had to have a sprinkler system, and we had to have a generator, and we treat our own water sewage system, and we have our own water for treatment plant. So all the asylum seekers were very well received at our hotel, and we also prepared meals for them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we think that we did a good job.
Appreciate
now, as
you.
far as the other as far as the other properties where there's land, there is a contract with the RCM trailers, but that was negotiated between Public Works and them. We have nothing to do with the trailers at RCM.
Sorry, so that I'm clear, they're on your property, the trailers?
Yes.
And how would you describe them, using your own words? You obviously see them, they're on your property. How would they compare to your hotel, just in terms of living conditions of the asylum seekers?
Well, it's not the same. It's not the same. I had the opportunity to visit briefly. These trailers are not the same as a hotel room. Our hotel rooms were classified with 3 to 4 stars with Quebec, and our rooms are all air conditioned, and we provide hot water and everything that's necessary for our les demandeurs d'asile.
And so when you're doing leasehold improvements there, what type of security considerations would you have had to include? Would you consider your hotel and the adjoining or the additional trailers to be a secured facility from a basic layman's terms?
A secure facility. Well, the only thing I can say is that our hotel, I think for 1 year or 2 years, we had fences all around it. We have the commissaires, they're there. For
Is that to keep people
purposes.
out or to keep them in?
Well, it's to keep my customers out, because actually the whole hotel is closed. We have no business from the outside world, and so we're losing the goodwill that we.
So you've had a material impact on. You've had a material
Of
impact
course.
on your business. Yes, no, I can appreciate that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I note the multi-generational nature of the holding. I note that if you had a crystal ball that could have predicted this, you know, perhaps this future contract by whatever donations, you know, perhaps you'd be living in Bermuda and not where you're at now, because you have answers to a whole bunch of other questions, I'm sure, that would be profitable. So I appreciate that. I want to give you the last 2 minutes here just to expand on anything, you know, given the fact that your name's come up publicly. I want to give you the chance to speak off the cuff here and just share any final thoughts that you might have around this scenario, how you found yourself in it, and what impacts it might have on you.
Well, we were very sensitive at the beginning. Customs they were all overwhelmed. RCMP was overwhelmed. Custom was overwhelmed. There was people everywhere. And there was one case of a lady who had a baby in the hallway at customs, and something needed to be done. So they came to see me. I didn't solicitate anybody. I didn't solicitate any politicians. I didn't solicitate any fonctionnaire. So everybody came knocking.
Sir, we had a list. I think Ms. Sachs had listed all the people in terms of the process. But just for clarity and to be absolutely clear, at any point in time, did you have any discussions with anybody political, or like we heard about Ms. Shanahan? Did you even just talk to Ms. Shanahan about it in passing?
No.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Those are my questions.
Thank you. And as we get into the next round here, I'm going to cut the times a little bit to get it. We're going to go over time, but not by much. So, we're going to go to Mr. Couric. Let's do 4 minutes. So, go ahead, Mr. Couric, and you'll be followed by Mr. Fergus.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to the committee today. Just to make clear, to follow up with Mr. Green, you mentioned that there have not been any conversations, not just negotiations. That was made very clear, but no conversations with Ms. Shanahan. Has there been any other discussions with any member of government, political staff, anyone outside of the Public Works folks and the initial contact with from CBSA related to the leasing of your properties?
None whatsoever.
Okay. So just so that we can have a clear understanding of what the timeline is, do you know the date that CBSA came and approached you regarding the use of your facility?
I have a timeline here. They started, it would be when they started renting the 2 suites at the hotel, would be the 23rd of April, 2018.
Okay. And
I'm sorry. Let me go back. They came to rent my first building the 1st of May, 2017. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. It's the 1st of May, 2017.
That would be the first time, yes.
Okay. In any of the discussions that have taken place, you had mentioned earlier something very interesting, that the government had talked about the confidential nature of these lease agreements. But just curious if at any point in time, the emergency nature of these leases, any of the property enhancements and whatnot, did the government ever bring up the emergency nature of how they were conducting these leases and whatnot?
Well, I will tell you that when they had the lease signed, they wanted everything for yesterday because it was an urgent matter, very urgent. Everything was for yesterday.
Okay. And has that continued? You mentioned here a few minutes ago some 5-year leases. Certainly, yes. It seems like when something is being signed for 5 years, that seems a lot longer than what constitutes a typical emergency.
Well, it's because they rented our building at 339 so that they can get rid of all their trailers from RCM. And I think to downsize, they would, by renting my 2 buildings, they're going to be saving quite a bit of money on a lot of expenses that they have right now.
Okay, so just curious, just looking at some of the information here, you had made donations to Ms. Shanahan's local EDA after signing these contracts. Did you ever consider about the perceived conflict of interest that might be looked at between these contracts and the fact that you were making donations to a Liberal member of Parliament's campaign infrastructure?
It never came to my mind.
Okay. Have you met her in person or seen her in person since 2017?
Yes, she stopped by my store. I have a retail store actually at the border. And she was doing her rounds, I guess, to visit all the different businesses in the area. She came to meet my employees and myself, and we.
Was that during an election or outside of an election period?
It was around. I don't recall exactly the date, but she did come, and actually they took a photo, and that photo ended up on CBC News.
Thank you, Mr. Couric. We're going to go next to Mr. Fergus for up to 4 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank Mr. Gay for being with us and for being very clear. And it's unfortunate that you're in such a situation because there's nothing here. But Mr. Gay, could you repeat your answers to the series of questions asked by my colleague, Ms. Sachs, so that we can be crystal clear in both official languages? Did you have any interactions on these negotiations with a minister of the government? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. No. I've had no discussions with any politicians or public office holders. So you can just say yes or no quickly. Minister, Parliamentary Secretary? No. Chief Electoral Officer? No. Member of departmental staff that works for a minister or a parliamentary secretary? No. A departmental advisor? No. Somebody named by the government, a governor in council or minister? No. And lastly, the parliamentary budget officer? No. Thank you very much, Mr. Gay, for confirming all of this for us. And again, if I can come back to another question that you were in the middle of responding, Ms. Khalid's question that has to do with the land that you are the owner of. I imagine that this land has been in the family for a while, because I noted that at the northern limits of your land is the street called La Montée-Gay, and I imagine it's not a coincidence. Can you tell us more about this? Answer. My father lived on the farm, and when he left the farm, he worked for the Royal Canadian Air Force. And when he came back from the war, he purchased from his brother the plot of land. I also acquired land over the past 30 years. We border the CBSA. We have about 225 acres on that border. So our neighbors are the CBSA. And we are here to assist our neighbors. Thank you very much. I would be remiss if I didn't thank your grandfather for his service to our country, and I would like to thank you, Mr. Guy, for being with us today and for assisting asylum seekers in Canada. Mr. Chair, I give you back the floor.
Go to Monsieur Villemur pour 2 minutes. MD. Okay, he's passing. Mr. Green?
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to move to adjourn this study.
Okay. Motion is made to adjourn the study. Discussion? No. Are there any opposed to adjourning the study, if I understand your motion correctly? Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. So, good information from our witnesses today. I think there were questions raised, with respect to different agencies that weren't here, but also there were some requests for documents that were made to folks. So, my concern with adjourning the study is the reporting that's to happen following it. Is that still going to continue? Will a report be completed, and then will that be reported to the House, or is the committee dispensing with this issue? Is that the intent of the motion?
I would have to ask, or I'll let the mover of the motion perhaps.
Yes, thank you.
Give
Thank you for the
clarification,
question.
because that's going to be up to the committee.
It's
Go
an
ahead.
important procedural question, and I would suggest that there was material information here from my perspective. There's some gaps in the process that I'd like more information on. They're going to provide us with that information. So my intention in adjourning the study was to wrap up the witnesses, the scheduling, get back to our business, allow that information to come in, and then draft a brief report or a debrief on, what we think happened based on the testimony that's been provided today.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
So Chair, through you, thanks to Mr. Green for that intent. So we're looking then, the result would be to adjourn the meeting, and then the committee is then would decide whether or not to call any witnesses. It sounds like, depending on how this motion goes, that there would then not be any more witnesses called. The committee would then receive the evidence through the clerk, and then once we have that evidence that was requested, then we could make a decision as a committee to provide drafting instructions. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if I understand what the intent is that we will that the committee ask for no further witnesses, receive the information that was requested. The committee can then decide what kind of report it wants to produce at a subsequent meeting. So, are there any other? Is there any other debate on the motion? Anybody opposed to the motion?
Just so we're clear, we're not adjourning the meeting, right? There's one point.
Correct. We're not
Okay.
we're not adjourning the meeting until I adjourn it.
Yep.
But we're getting pretty close to the time. But if there's no opposition to the motion carries.
Okay.
So with that, if there are no further questions for the witness, then we'll conclude the witness portion of the meeting. Boy, I'm going to get this under the wire here for our normal adjournment time, which I know members of the committee appreciate. So I'll just maybe take a minute, and I do want to thank the analysts for the very capable work that they do for us, as well as our clerk. And with that meeting. Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, I don't know how the process works, but I'm going to take this moment and just thank you for the way that you've chaired this committee. I think you've done an outstanding job in a very nonpartisan way, I have to say. As far as committees go, you did a fantastic job. And if a special dispensation could be made to make sure that you stay here indefinitely, I would certainly make that dispensation. But in a nonpartisan way, I just want to thank you.
Well, you're all too kind, and I wasn't going to address the serious possibility that I may not chair further meetings of this committee. But anyway, I do appreciate that.
We love you on the way in and the way
with
out,
that,
in between.
Indeed. With that, meeting adjourned.
Oh yeah, we're gonna.